Hi there, Malcolm here for my 174th Booktube video, and today I'll be bringing you my August wrap-up. As there are 14 books on the list and I'm filming this on the 27th of September, I'm not going to bother with the TBR. I'll be talking about those books in a couple of days anyway. So first off, the numbers. As I said, 14 books, totalling 4,613 pages, putting me 3,220 pages up on last year. So doing rather well now. It did help that I had some holiday time, so a lot of time was spent reading there. Alright, 14 books to get through, let's get cracking. So first up is Halo, A Broken Circle by John Shirley. I have about 20 Halo books, thought it's about time I actually read the damn things. This one chronologically is the earliest one in the series that I own. I have read the Forerunner Saga trilogy by Greg Bear, but this one comes next. So Broken Circle is really a two-part story set way before the events of the original Halo game. And basically it looks at the Sangh'Shayum subjugation of the Sanghelius people. If you play the game, you know them as the elites. And of course they didn't think much of that, and there was a rebellion. And so we follow a team of elite rebels as they flee to a shell world that has not been discovered by the Covenant yet. And we follow a more sympathetic Sangh'Shayum, or prophet, as he is tasked with tracking them down. The second half of the story takes place during the conclusion of the third game of the trilogy, and the rise of the brutes, and the various goings on that takes place while the Master Chief is stopping the big bad thing from happening in the end of the third game. All in all, I really enjoyed this book, although I would say this is recommended for people who know and like the games. Certainly there's no human characters in here really at all, and even in the opening line of the first page, Makun Skra Ben Shahayum, High Lord of Sacred Relics, is not necessarily the best opening to a book, because it's like, sorry, what? That was just gibberish. But I suppose it throws you right into the story. So a nice prequel to the main series, with perhaps even a bit of a hint of a prologue to the fourth game. I've not played the fourth game yet, but I kind of know what goes on in it. I quite enjoyed the multi-generational aspect, as well as the brief history of the subjugation of all the species in the Covenant. Yeah, right. After that I then read AntMan World Hive, another Marvel Select graphic novel. And this one sees Scott Lang as Ant-Man and his daughter, currently going by the name of Sting, as they take on Swarm, only to find out that he's not really the bad guy in this one, and they actually need to team up with him against even worse threats. The artwork is really cartoony, fun, pops off the page. It fits in line with the story, which is very funny. Lots of quips. Scott Lang really is a loser. No, he's trying to prove himself to Cassie, his daughter. Yeah, he is an Avenger, but even the Avengers treat him like something that came in on their shoe. And at the end there's a two-part special showing the original introduction of Scott Lang as the new Ant-Man, as he faces off against Darren Cross, the villain from the Ant-Man film, but a very different character to that. And that was really enjoyable as well. Buy it. And after that I then read Firefly, What Makes Us Mighty by M.K. England. At the time of reading the most recent Firefly novel, however there's been another one come out since, Coup de Grace, which I'll have to read at some point. As predicted, the crew do a job for a guy, only for the job to go sideways and everything to go hobbly wrong. Well, sort of this time actually. The job goes really well, they get paid for it. They get treated really well as guests to this wealthy man. But then they realise the massive wealth inequalities of the land this guy's in charge of, and the fact that the goods that they brought him happen to be some of the worst crowd control weapons ever devised. So are Mao and the crew of Serenity up for being part of a rebellion? I'm happy to report, like with all the other Firefly novels, this feels like a missing episode. All the characters feel like the actual characters with the nuances that the actors portray for them. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Booktastic. And after that I then finished listening to The Reality Dysfunction by Peter F. Hamilton, book one of the Night's Dawn trilogy. This is an audible read by John Lee. At over 41 hours or 1,000 pages. I was really glad to have listened to this one rather than try and reading it, because it allowed me to read a load of other stuff, and I listened to this while driving the car. And as it's an audible, I ought to address both aspects of this story. So first off, the narration. I found John Lee to be a little bit stilted compared to some of the other readers I've listened to, but I found he did a serviceable job, and I did appreciate he gave a different voice for each character, including various accents. Now, when reviewing what other people thought of this book, particularly John Lee's narration, people were extremely rude about him, which I felt was a little harsh. I'm not great at identifying accents, let alone bad ones, so all the accents he provided for me, I accepted on face value, and it did help differentiate between who was talking. The other big complaint I do agree with was that there was no breaths made between passages. With such a big book, there were plenty of characters in there, and each chapter didn't limit itself to just one character, so it would jump from character to character, place to place. You know, when you're reading a book, and then sometimes you get a little gap between sections, and sometimes you can get bigger ones denoted by the dinkus, the 3 asterisks, and you know you're going from one scene to a completely different scene, maybe a bit later on, or somewhere completely different. In the narration, you get to the end of one scene, and then literally following on for that as if nothing's changed, he would carry on without any sort of warning or change of anything. So you know, it'd take a couple of sentences for you to work out, hang on, no, we're here now doing something completely different to what we were literally just doing. So that's the narration. What about the story? I'd say the story was not the easiest to get into, and I, again, am really glad that I listened to it rather than trying to read it. For the first, well, I felt like half of the book, nothing happened, or rather, there was no clear plot or direction. With a prologue with a spaceship being attacked and getting blown up, and well, that's the end of that. And then we introduce some new characters, and some other new characters doing this thing, some other characters doing this thing, and then another new character doing this thing. And it's a case of, well, why should I care? There's no relation between anything at all. I think had I been reading it after about 400 pages, I might have decided, well, what's the point? I don't know what's going on here. There's nothing happening. Thankfully, I did stick with it because I did enjoy the whole colonisation of Lalonde. We follow a group of people going to this planet. They've been colonising it for decades, but it's a new group, a new town's going to get set up, and we follow them as they go upriver, find this new place, start cutting down trees and setting up everything. And that was really interesting. We also follow a chap called Joshua, who's out in space investigating a rubble ring where ancient civilization destroyed itself, trying to salvage components to sell, and there's a big mystery as to why this species wiped itself out. Like I say, this goes on, and you're thinking, oh, this is all very nice, but what's the point? Finally, a thing happens, and the living start getting possessed by the dead. It's not quite a zombie outbreak, because the possessed are literally taken over by somebody else, and effectively becomes that previous person. And of course, from that point on, the story really takes off. As first, tiny sections of Lalonde are taken over, and then bigger sections, people are trying to work out what's going on. Other planets have no idea anything is happening. There's guesswork and other things, and there's a villainous character who pops up from before, and they're all worried about him. And of course, then it gets off planet and starts spreading across the galaxy. As I say, this is book 1 of a trilogy. It doesn't really end at any particular point. I mean, certainly some aspects are resolved, and other ones are begun. But no, certainly left wanting more. So in the end, I did enjoy it, but really, really glad I stuck with it. Did it need to be 41 hours long or over 1,000 pages in length? I sincerely doubt it. I think there could have been an awful lot taken out and the story wouldn't have changed at all. And there's one story that doesn't even seem to fit. We occasionally follow a character called Syrinx, who, although does get involved in some of the characters and events that take place, nothing really happens or is resolved as a result of them being there. You know, you could take out the Syrinx storyline entirely and the book wouldn't change. But no, on the whole, really glad I listened to it, and if I had space for it and the inclination to sit down and read a 1,000-page plus book, I'd buy it. And after that, I then read Predator, South China Sea by Jeff Vandermeer. Now, last month I waved this at the camera saying this looks like a sort of similar story to the original film. No, completely wrong. So, nice, happy to be wrong there. This is a very different tale set on an island where the rich and wealthy go to hunt anything they like, really. And the guy who runs it has his own militia, as he also gets up to other nefarious things. And of course, very quickly, the hunter becomes the hunted. But thankfully not in the traditional way. Now, one way I could say this is a bit of a negative, because halfway through the book, with the exception of some hapless pirates who crossed their predator near the beginning, at the halfway point, no one's actually died. But then it does kick off, and yeah, really, really exciting. We get to see a few new things from the Predator, some different technology we haven't seen before, and with an ending I haven't seen before either. Some really nice unique thoughts in here. It's not just another Predator book. Some thought has been given to make this different from other Predator books, so it avoided that formulaic feeling that a lot of these type of stories can have. A relatively slow start meant that it was merely worth reading. I enjoyed it, but it could have been better. And after that, I then read Species, the novelisation of the film by Yvonne Navarro, and simultaneously the graphic novel published by Boxtree and written by Dennis Feldman. Now, I have re-watched the film, and as a sci-fi monster film, it's okay. And as a result, these two also qualify as merely being okay in terms of story. They're both well written, and like with all novelisations, I am always curious to know what they leave in from the film, what they changed from the film, what ended up on the cutting room floor from the film that ended up in the book, and also how the book and the graphic novel differed. And I was really interested to see what was in here that wasn't in here, and what was in here that wasn't in here. For those who don't know, Species is about a genetic experiment that goes horribly wrong. Mankind has to be listening to the stars via SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and one day they receive a signal. Actually, receive two signals. The first is a piece of technology which makes fuel more efficient or something, and the second is a DNA code which, when spliced with humans, will produce something. In an experiment, they create this little girl who quickly escapes and goes on a killing rampage. A team is quickly formed to track her down and stop her. That sort of story. Being a Box Street publication, the artwork of the graphic novel is rather weak. It's very traditional for the era, I suppose. Very cheaply done. It's never particularly good, but you can tell who's who. No one ever gets mixed up in this. Ideal for fans of the film, if there are such things. Yeah, it's worth reading, I suppose. And after that, I then read The Valhalla Prophecy by Andy McDermott, one of the Wild Chase novels, book 9. And in this one, Nina Wilde and Eddie Chase end up hunting for Valhalla, the halls of Valhalla. I'll be chased by hordes of bad guys with guns and other explosive type things. Lots of action, lots of excitement, interspersed with stories of one of Eddie Chase's previous adventures, where he ended up doing things he wasn't too proud of, and coincidentally happens to tie into the main adventure that they're on. Like all these other books, really exciting. All the thrilling stuff's thrilling, all the exciting stuff's exciting, and the witty stuff's funny. You know what you're getting with these books, and despite being over 560 pages long, I whizzed through this really quickly. Buy it. And then next up, I read Game Over, Oops. Now, we went to holiday in France, Brittany, lots of standing stones, lovely part of the world, never been there before. And we frequented the local bookshops there. And blimey, they don't half put the British bookshops to shame. Unfortunately, all the books in the French bookshops are in French. Who would have thought it? So I tried my hand at reading Game Over. A comic strip with next to no words at all. So even people who can't speak French can read it. So that was suitable for me. Each page is its own gag, which follows these two hapless characters on the front cover here as they try to escape some sort of dungeon crawling game, only to fall foul of some trap or other comeuppance at the end. Hence, Game Over. Really enjoyed it, and it's one of those books you can just read and read and read, and worth buying. After that, I then read set after the Avengers have disbanded. I don't know quite why they disbanded, but they've disbanded. And so we have a new generation of heroes taking up the helm, even though they're not supposed to take on Kang of all people. Featuring a lot of characters I didn't really know much about before, along with some familiar faces as well. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Much more straight-faced than the AntMan book. You know, there were some quips, but this is a much more serious story and worth buying. And after that, I then read Game Over, Dark Web. Enjoyed the first one so much that I went out and got another one. And there's a whole bunch of them in the series. And again, very few words, a couple of onomatopoeias perhaps. Yeah, glad I bought it. And it's a nice, shiny, funky, textured front cover as well. And then after that, it was The Eye of God by James Rowlands, book 9 of the Sigma Force series. And in this one, the tomb of Genghis Khan is the key to the survival of the human race, as the planet is going to get destroyed by a comet unless a MacGuffin is found and placed in Genghis Khan's tomb. Despite their completely ridiculous premise, this was hugely enjoyable. Lots of action sequences, lots of adventure, a lot of fun. Worth buying. And after that, I then read Spiderverse, another Marvel Select graphic novel, this one following Miles Morales. And this time the Spiderverse itself is under attack, and Miles Morales is dragged through various alternate realities, meeting various iterations of Spider-Man, until finally finding the nugget of the problem and solving it. I never knew there were so many different Spider-Mans. Really, really good. Worth buying. And then finally, I then read Lifeless by Mark Billingham, a Tom Thorne novel. I'd underestimated the amount of reading I was going to get done during the holiday and read everything I'd brought. Thankfully, there was a bookshelf in the house we were staying at, and this one caught my eye. I've already read 4 other Tom Thorne books, so I knew I was going to probably like this one. And in this crime novel, Detective Tom Thorne is investigating a series of murders done against homeless people, and is personally trying to come to terms with the death of his father, which happened in the previous book apparently. I've not read that one. And so to put it back to everything, he turns to living on the streets to join the homeless community to find out just what is going on and who's the next target. To say I really enjoyed it is a bit of a weird way to describe this book, because it's quite gritty, it's quite dark, and certainly learning more about the homeless community is always a bit of an eye-opener. And when the motive is found out eventually, the coincidence between that and the real world events at the time that this was published kind of made the story that little bit more poignant unintentionally, because obviously when he wrote it this hadn't happened or been revealed. Yeah, really good. So there we go, that is 14 books. If you've read any of those books, I'd love to know what you thought of them, or if you want to read any of those books, why? And what do you do if you go on holiday and you've read everything you've brought, or has there never been an issue? Comments below please, but as usual, if you have nothing nice to say then please keep it to yourself. And until next time, which will be quite soon, because like I say, I'm going to have to do September's wrap up very, very soon. See you later.